Damien Moretti thought he could replace anything that bored him: cars, watches, even his pregnant wife. So he traded Elena for a younger woman and never looked back. But when he saw her again months later, standing beside a billionaire whose wealth made his empire look like pocket change, wearing a dress that cost more than his cars, glowing with a confidence he'd never seen before, Damien realized he hadn't upgraded. He'd thrown away the only real thing he ever had. And she? She didn't even glance his way. Like this video, comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels, and stay until the end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Damien Moretti didn't do regret. He did power. He did control. He did whatever the hell he wanted, whenever he wanted. And the world bent around him because that's what happened when you owned half of Manhattan's underground and had enough money to make problems disappear before breakfast. Tonight, he sat in the back corner of Aurelius, the kind of restaurant where they didn't print prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you didn't belong there. His fingers drummed against the white tablecloth, expensive watch catching the low amber light. Across from him sat Vivian Shaw, 23 years old, legs that went on for days, and a face that stopped traffic on Fifth Avenue. She was talking. He wasn't listening. And I told her that if she wanted to wear Valentino to the same event as me, she could at least have the decency to. Damien, are you even paying attention? He blinked, looked at her. She was beautiful, objectively, mathematically beautiful. High cheekbones, perfect skin, hair that probably cost $1,000 to maintain every month. Everything he'd wanted when he'd decided Elena wasn't enough anymore. Yeah, Mop, he said. Valentino. Got it. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You're thinking about her again. I'm not. You are. You get this look. What look? Like you're doing math in your head and the numbers aren't adding up. Damien reached for his whiskey. Glenfiddich, 50 years old, the kind of pour that costs more than most people's car payments. He took a slow sip, let the burn settle in his chest. Drop it, Viv. It's been 6 months, Damien. She's gone. You made your choice. He had. He absolutely had. Elena had been pregnant, emotional, complicated. She'd stopped going to events with him, stopped fitting into the dresses he bought her, stopped being the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. She'd become quiet, withdrawn, boring. So he'd done what any man in his position would do. He'd upgraded. Except sitting here now, watching Vivian check her phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes, scrolling through Instagram likes on photos she'd posted of the two of them, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd miscalculated somewhere. Mr. Moretti. He looked up. Carlo stood beside the table, his driver and occasional enforcer. A man built like a cement truck and twice as subtle. Carlo didn't interrupt dinner unless it mattered. What? There's a situation. Club needs you. Damien's jaw tightened. He owned 3 clubs in Manhattan, 2 in Brooklyn, and 1 in Queens that was barely profitable but useful for moving money around. Which one? Apex. His flagship, the one that mattered. What kind of situation? The kind you need to handle personally. Vivian huffed. Seriously? We're in the middle of dinner. Damien was already standing, dropping his napkin on the table. Stay. Finish eating. Carlo will take you home after. I don't want Carlo to take me home. I want you to take me home. Not tonight. Damien! But he was already walking, Carlo falling into step beside him, the restaurant blurring past in a wash of low lighting and expensive cologne. Outside, the November air hit cold and sharp. The car was waiting, black Mercedes, tinted windows, engine running. They didn't speak until they were 6 blocks away. It's not the club, Carlo said quietly. Damien's head turned. What? There's no situation at Apex. Everything's fine. Then why the hell did you pull me out of dinner? Carlo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Big man, ex-military, scared of exactly 3 things in this world. His mother, the IRS, and disappointing Damien. Right now he looked like he was bracing for option 3. You needed an exit, Carlo said. You've been miserable all night, all week, all month. I'm not paying you to have opinions about my mood. You're paying me to watch your back. That includes watching you self-destruct over a woman you threw away. Damien's voice dropped to something dangerous. Careful. Boss, I've known you 8 years. I've seen you stare down prosecutors, rival families, and a federal task force. I've never seen you look the way you look tonight, sitting across from that girl, pretending you're somewhere you want to be. Vivian is exactly what I wanted. Vivian is what you thought you wanted. There's a difference. The car slowed for a red light. Outside, Manhattan scrolled past in blurs of neon and glass. Damien stared out the window, watching people who weren't him live lives that weren't his, and felt something ugly twist in his chest. "Where is she?" he said quietly. Carlo didn't ask who. "I don't know. She disappeared, changed her number, moved out of the apartment. No social media, no trail." "She didn't just vanish. She did a pretty good job of it." The light turned green. The car moved forward. Damien's reflection stared back at him from the window. Sharp suit, expensive haircut, everything a man like him was supposed to look like. He barely recognized himself. "Find her," he said. "Boss, I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find Elena." Carlo's jaw worked. "And then what?" Good question. Damien didn't have an answer. 3 weeks later, Carlo walked into Damien's office at 2 in the afternoon, carrying a manila folder and an expression that said, this conversation was going to hurt. Damien was on the phone, closing a deal with a construction company that owed him a favor and needed to remember it. He held up one finger. Carlo waited. Patient. Still. The way you waited when you had bad news and knew there was no good time to deliver it. Damien ended the call. Talk. Carlo dropped the folder on the desk. Found her. Something sharp turned in Damien's chest. Where? Upper East Side. Lives in a building that costs more per month than most people make in a year. Penthouse. River view. Damien's eyebrows rose. How the hell is she affording that? She's not. Carlo's voice was flat, controlled. He is. The room got very quiet. He who... Carlo opened the folder, slid a photo across the desk. Damien looked down. Black and white surveillance shot taken from across the street. Slightly grainy, but clear enough. Elena standing on a sidewalk, wearing a coat that probably cost 5 figures, hair pulled back, profile sharp against the winter light. And beside her, hand resting lightly on her lower back, a man Damien didn't recognize. Tall, mid-40s, well-dressed in the way that screamed real money, not new money. The kind of man who didn't need to prove anything to anyone because his bank account did the talking. Who is he? Adrian Voss. The name landed like a kick to the ribs. Damien's head snapped up. The Adrian Voss? Unless there's another billionaire with that name walking around Manhattan. There wasn't. Adrian Voss was a ghost, a legend. A man so rich he made people like Damien look like they were playing with monopoly money, hedge funds, real estate, tech investments. The man owned pieces of companies most people didn't even know existed. He didn't do interviews, didn't do social media, barely appeared in public. And when he did, it was always calculated, always controlled, always with purpose. Damien stared at the photo, at Elena's face, at the way she stood beside this man like she belonged there. How long? He said, voice tight. Near as I can tell, 4 months, maybe 5. 4 months, 5 months. Which meant she'd met him right after. She was pregnant with my kid when she met him? Carlo nodded. Still is. 7 months now. Damien's hand curled into a fist on the desk. And he knows. He knows. Doesn't seem to care. Of course he didn't care. Men like Adrian Voss didn't care about things like that. They saw something they wanted and they took it, consequences be damned, just like Damien did. Except apparently Adrian Voss had wanted Elena, and Damien had handed her right over without even realizing he was doing it. There's more, Carlo said quietly. Of course there is. Carlo slid another photo across the desk. This one was in color, taken at some kind of charity event, the kind where tickets started at $10,000 and went up from there. Elena was in the center of the frame, wearing a dress that looked like liquid silver, fitted over the curve of her pregnant belly, diamonds at her throat and ears. She looked radiant, confident, like a woman who'd never spent a single day doubting her worth. Beside her, Adrian Voss stood in a perfect tux, one hand resting on her waist, looking at her the way a man looked at something priceless. Damien's stomach turned. That was taken last week, Carlo said. Winter Gala raised $4 million for pediatric cancer research. She was one of the hosts. She was what? A host. Her name was on the invite. Elena Vale, not Elena Moretti. Vale, her maiden name. Of course. Of course she'd gone back to her maiden name. She'd erased him, cut him out like a tumor and moved on. And the worst part? She looked better now than she ever had with him. Damien closed the folder, shoved it across the desk. I want to know everything, where she goes, who she sees, what she does. Boss, I really think... I didn't ask what you think. I told you what I want. Carlo's jaw tightened, but he nodded, picked up the folder, turned to leave. Carlo. He stopped. Does she look happy? Carlo didn't turn around, didn't need to. Yeah, boss, she does. The door closed. Damien sat alone in his office, surrounded by leather and mahogany and all the trappings of a man who'd built an empire on fear and blood and ruthless ambition, and for the first time in his life, none of it felt like enough. That night, Damien took Vivienne to a Broadway show she'd been begging to see for weeks. Orchestra seats, $1,500 a ticket, the kind of thing that was supposed to impress. She spent the first act on her phone. The second act, she fell asleep. Afterward, they went to a bar in Tribeca where bottles of champagne cost a month's rent, and the music was loud enough to drown out thinking. Vivienne drank 3 glasses in 40 minutes and started dancing with a hedge fund manager who looked like he'd walked out of a cologne commercial. Damien watched from the booth, nursing a scotch he didn't want, and realized he didn't care. He didn't care that she was dancing with someone else, didn't care that she'd barely spoken to him all night, didn't care about any of it, because all he could think about was Elena in that silver dress, standing beside a man who looked at her like she was the only woman in the room, glowing with a confidence Damien had spent their entire marriage trying to dim because it made him feel small. His phone buzzed. Text from Carlo. She's at Cipriani. Private event. He's with her. Damien stood, dropped $200 on the table, walked out without saying goodbye. Vivienne didn't even notice. Cipriani was 12 blocks away. Damien walked it, needed the air, needed to move. The city rushed past in honks and headlights and the smell of roasted nuts from a corner vendor. November in Manhattan, cold enough to sting but not cold enough to snow. The kind of night that made everything feel sharp and immediate. He got to the restaurant and stopped across the street, standing in the shadow of a building, watching the entrance. Black cars pulled up. Valets in white gloves. Women in furs and men in tuxes. Old money and new money, and the kind of people who thought money was boring because they'd always had it. And then she stepped out of a car. Damien's breath caught. She wore black this time. Simple, elegant, fitted to her body in a way that somehow made her pregnancy look regal instead of awkward. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders, longer than he remembered. Diamonds caught the light at her ears. She moved with a grace he'd never noticed before, or maybe he'd noticed and just never appreciated. Adrian Voss emerged behind her, offering his hand to help her from the car. She took it, smiling at something he said, and the way she looked at him. Damien felt something crack in his chest. She'd never looked at him like that. Not once. Not even in the beginning, when things were good, when he'd thought they were good. She'd looked at him with affection, maybe, with tolerance, with the resigned acceptance of a woman who'd made a choice and decided to live with it. But this? This was different. This was a woman looking at a man who made her feel safe. They walked into the restaurant together, Adrian's hand on the small of her back, protective and possessive in a way that didn't feel controlling. Just present. Just there. Damien stood across the street for 20 minutes, watching the door, waiting for something he couldn't name. A sign. A reason. An excuse to walk over there and what? What the hell was he going to do? Walk in and demand she come back? Tell her she'd made a mistake? That she belonged with him, the man who'd thrown her away the second she stopped being convenient? His phone buzzed. Vivienne. Where did you go? He stared at the message, didn't answer, shoved the phone back in his pocket. A doorman was watching him now, eyes narrowed, hand drifting toward his radio. Damien looked like the kind of man who didn't belong on this block unless he had business here. And standing in the shadows staring at a restaurant definitely wasn't business. He turned, walked away, got in the car he'd texted for and told the driver to just drive anywhere. It didn't matter. They ended up in Brooklyn, Red Hook, down by the water where the city opened up and you could see the skyline across the river, all glass and light and ambition. Damien got out, stood at the edge of the pier, lit a cigarette even though he'd quit 6 months ago. The smoke tasted like failure. 2 days later, Vivian broke up with him. They were in his apartment, his penthouse, 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the kind of place that was supposed to make people understand how important he was. She was packing her things into a Louis Vuitton bag he'd bought her in Paris. "This isn't working," she said, not looking at him. Damien sat on the couch, scotch in hand, watching her move around the room, collecting earrings and phone chargers and pieces of herself she'd scattered around his life. "Okay," he said. She stopped, turned. "That's it? Okay. What do you want me to say?" "I don't know, Damien. Maybe ask me why. Maybe try to convince me to stay." "You want me to convince you to stay?" She faltered, looked away. "No, I don't." "Then okay." She zipped the bag, slung it over her shoulder. "You never really wanted me. You know that, right, Viv? You wanted the idea of me, young, pretty, easy, someone who didn't ask questions or make you feel things you didn't want to feel, but you never actually wanted me." Damien said nothing, because she was right. "And the worst part?" Vivian's voice cracked. "I knew it the whole time. I knew I was just a distraction from whoever she was. And I stayed anyway because I thought maybe if I was perfect enough, pretty enough, fun enough, you'd forget her. It's not. Don't." "Oh," she held up a hand. "Don't lie. Not now. You're in love with someone who isn't here, and I'm standing right in front of you, and you still can't see me." The door closed behind her, quiet, final. Damien sat in the silence of his too-big apartment and finished his drink. Carlo brought him the next update a week later. "There's an event," he said. 3 weeks from now. Winter masquerade at the plaza. Black tie. Invitation only. She'll be there." Damien looked up from the paperwork he wasn't reading. "How do you know?" "She's on the host committee. Her name's on the website." Of course it was. Elena had always loved events like that, back when they were together. She'd light up planning them, coordinating details, making sure everything was perfect. He'd found it annoying then. Trivial. A waste of time that could have been spent on things that mattered. Now he wondered what else he'd called trivial that had actually mattered. "Can you get me in?" Carlo hesitated. "Boss, I really don't think... Can you get me in or not?" "I can get you in, but this is a bad idea." "Most of my ideas are bad. That's never stopped me before. This is different." "How?" "Because this isn't about business. This isn't about territory or money or control. This is about a woman who left you, moved on, and is clearly doing fine without you. And you're about to walk into her world uninvited because you can't accept that she's gone." Damien leaned back in his chair. "You finished?" Carlo's jaw worked. "Yeah, I'm finished." "Good. Get me the invitation." The next 3 weeks moved like tar. Slow, sticky, impossible to escape. Damien tried to focus on work. The clubs were doing well. Money was flowing. Deals were closing. Everything was exactly as it should be for a man in his position. But at night, alone in his apartment, he'd find himself scrolling through old photos on his phone. Pictures of Elena from before. Early in their relationship, when she still smiled at him like he was something worth smiling at, he remembered the first time he'd seen her, some art gallery opening in Chelsea, the kind of thing he'd only gone to because a business associate insisted. She'd been standing in front of a painting, head tilted, genuinely considering it. Not performing, not pretending, just looking. He'd walked over, said something stupid about the art. She'd laughed. Actually laughed. Not the polite titter women usually gave him when they recognized who he was. You have no idea what you're talking about, she'd said. Not even a little bit. Then why'd you come? Business. Ah, you're one of those. One of what? Men who only do things if there's something in it for them. He'd grinned. And you're one of those women who pretend she's not impressed by men like me. Who says I'm pretending? 3 months later, they were married. Fast, reckless. The kind of decision you make when you're 32 and convinced you know exactly what you want and how the world works. Except Damien hadn't known anything. He'd known how to build an empire, how to move money, how to make men fear him. But he hadn't known how to love someone, hadn't even known he was supposed to try. And now Elena was gone, standing beside a man who'd probably figured out in 5 months what Damien had failed to learn in 5 years. The night of the winter masquerade, Damien stood in front of his mirror adjusting a bow tie he'd tied and retied 6 times. Carlo waited by the door looking like a man attending a funeral. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yeah, Damien said, I do. Why? Because I need to see her. You've seen her, in the photos. You know she's fine. I need to see her see me. Carlo shook his head. And then what? You think she's going to take one look at you, remember why she fell in love and come running back? No. Then what's the point? Damien met his own eyes in the mirror, saw a man who looked successful, powerful, put together, and completely hollow. I don't know, he said quietly. I just know I have to go. Tuk-tuk. The plaza was exactly what he expected. Opulent, excessive, dripping with the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Damien walked in wearing a mask, black, simple, required for entry, and immediately felt out of place. This wasn't his world. His world was clubs and back rooms and deals made over whiskey in places where everyone understood the currency was power. This was different. This was old money and charity galas, and people who gave away millions the way he gave away threats. He moved through the ballroom, scanning faces, looking for her. And then he saw him first. Adrian Voss stood near the bar, talking to someone Damien didn't recognize, wearing a tux that probably cost more than Damien's car, and carrying himself with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to prove anything. He was taller than Damien had thought, more commanding in person. The kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make people listen. And then Elena appeared beside him. Damien's world stopped. She wore gold, a dress that caught every light in the room and threw it back brighter, fitted over her pregnant belly in a way that should have looked awkward but instead looked powerful. Her mask was delicate, ornate, and completely unnecessary because Damien would have known her silhouette in the dark from a mile away. She said something to Adrian. He laughed, leaned down to kiss her temple. She smiled. And Damien realized, standing there in a room full of people who'd never understand what it felt like to want something you'd thrown away, that he'd lost her. Not tonight, not when she'd met Adrian, but months ago, years ago maybe, in all the small moments when he'd chosen himself over her, when he'd made her feel small instead of safe, when he'd treated her like an accessory instead of a partner. He'd lost her the first time he'd made her feel like she wasn't enough. And no amount of money, power, or regret was going to bring her back. Damien didn't approach her. Couldn't. His feet stayed planted on the marble floor while his brain screamed at him to move, to do something, to not just stand here like some pathetic ghost haunting a party he didn't belong at. Elena turned slightly, laughing at something a woman in a red dress said, and for one terrible second, Damien thought she'd seen him. But her eyes passed right over where he stood. No recognition, no pause. Nothing. He was invisible. Just another masked figure in a room full of people who mattered more than he did. Adrian's hand moved to Elena's lower back again, that same protective gesture Damien had seen in the photos, and something hot and ugly twisted in his gut. He wanted to walk over there, wanted to grab Adrian Voss by his perfect lapels and tell him exactly who the hell he was touching, whose child she was carrying, who had the right to... Damien? He turned. A woman stood beside him, mid-50s, elegant, wearing diamonds that could probably fund a small country. It took him 3 seconds to place her. Margaret Ashford, old money. Her husband had owned half of the Upper East Side before he died and left it all to her. Mrs. Ashford? He forced his voice into something resembling normal. I thought that was you under the mask. What brings you to an event like this? Charity isn't usually your scene. It wasn't. Everyone here knew it. Damien Moretti showed up to galas when he needed to make connections or launder reputation, not because he gave a damn about whatever cause was being peddled. Supporting a good cause, he said, the lie smooth and practiced. Margaret's eyes, sharp, assessing, the kind that had watched Manhattan's elite for 40 years and missed nothing, flicked past him to where Elena stood. Ah, I see. You see what? Elena looks radiant, doesn't she? Pregnancy suits her, and Adrian is absolutely besotted. It's quite sweet, really. We were all so surprised when they appeared together, but now seeing them, well, they make sense. Some people just fit. Every word landed like a knife between his ribs. They've known each other long? Damien kept his voice carefully neutral. Only since summer, from what I understand. But you know how Adrian is. When he decides on something, he commits completely. No hesitation. I imagine that kind of certainty must be refreshing for her after... Margaret stopped, smiled. Well, after. After him. She meant after him, after Damien, after being married to a man who'd thrown her away the second she became inconvenient. They seem happy, Damien said, because he had to say something. They are. Elena's been an absolute treasure on the planning committee. Such vision, such grace. And the way Adrian looks at her, honestly, Damien, it's the kind of thing you read about in novels, the kind of love that makes you believe in it again. Love. The word sat wrong in his mouth. Damien didn't do love. He did possession, control, want. But love? That was for people who had time to feel things, and Damien had never had that kind of time. Except watching Elena now, watching the way she touched Adrian's arm, the way she leaned into him when he whispered something in her ear, Damien realized maybe that was the problem. Maybe he'd been so busy building an empire that he'd forgotten empires didn't mean shit if you had no one to share them with. Excuse me, he said, already moving away before Margaret could respond. He needed air, needed space, needed to not be in this room watching the woman he'd thrown away look happier than she'd ever looked with him. The balcony was cold, December wind cutting through his tux like he wasn't wearing anything at all. The city spread out below, Manhattan glittering and indifferent. Somewhere down there, people were living normal lives. Jobs. Families. Problems that didn't include watching your ex-wife fall in love with someone better than you. You shouldn't be out here without a coat. Damien spun. Elena stood in the doorway, backlit by the ballroom's golden light, and for a moment he forgot how to breathe. She'd removed her mask. Her face was exactly as he remembered. Sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that missed nothing, mouth that used to smile at him before he'd given her reasons to stop. Except now there was something different. A confidence, a steel that hadn't been there before. Elena. Damien. She said his name like it was a fact, not a feeling. Neutral, distant. I saw you inside, thought I should say hello before you spent the whole night lurking. I wasn't lurking. You were standing in the corner watching me for 20 minutes. That's the definition of lurking. Fair point. She moved onto the balcony, careful in her heels, one hand resting on her belly in a gesture that was probably unconscious. 7 months pregnant, carrying his child, standing 5 feet away from him like they were strangers making small talk. You look good, Damien said, because it was true, and because he didn't know what else to say. Thank you. Really good. Happy. Something flickered across her face. Not anger, not sadness, just acknowledgement. I am happy. With him. With Adrian? Yes. And with myself. And with the life I'm building. She paused. The life I should have built a long time ago. The words hit harder than a fist. Elena. Why are you here, Damien? I was invited. You bought your way in. Margaret told me someone made a last-minute $50,000 donation to get a seat at the table that has your fingerprints all over it. $50,000. Carlo had handled the details. Damien hadn't asked the price because the price didn't matter. I wanted to see you. Why? Good question. Great question. The kind of question that deserved an answer Damien didn't have. I don't know, he said honestly. I just needed to. Elena studied him, and he felt like a specimen under glass, being examined, catalogued, found wanting. You look miserable, she said finally. Thanks. I don't mean it cruelly. I mean you look like a man who made a choice he regrets, and now he doesn't know how to live with it. And if I do regret it, then that's something you need to figure out on your own, because I can't help you with that. I did my time trying to be enough for you, Damien. I'm not doing it again. You were always enough. Her laugh was sharp, bitter. No, I wasn't. Or maybe I was, but you couldn't see it. You were too busy looking for whatever came next, younger, prettier, easier. And when I got pregnant, when I needed you to actually be present for 5 seconds, you decided I was the problem. That's not... You threw me away. Her voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to gut him. I was carrying your child, and you replaced me like I was a car you were bored of driving. Damien had no defense, because she was right. That's exactly what he'd done. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Are you? Or are you just sorry because you saw me with someone else and realized maybe you gave up something you shouldn't have? Both. Neither. He didn't know anymore. Does he treat you well? That's none of your business. You're carrying my kid. That makes it my business. Elena's eyes went hard. No. What makes it your business is if you decide to actually be a father, which, let's be honest, we both know isn't going to happen. You don't know that, don't I? When's the last time you asked about the baby, Damien? When's the last time you checked if I was okay? If the pregnancy was going well? If I needed anything? Never. The answer was never. Because Damien had been too busy feeling sorry for himself to consider that Elena might need something from him beyond leaving her alone. I didn't think you'd want to hear from me. But I didn't. I don't. But if you actually cared about this child, you would have tried anyway. You would have put aside your ego and your pride and your hurt feelings and done what a parent is supposed to do, which is show up. I'm here now. You're here for you, not for me, not for the baby. For you. Because you can't stand that I moved on, that I found someone who treats me the way you never did. How does he treat you? Like I matter. 3 words, that's all it took. 3 words, and Damien felt the ground disappear beneath him. You mattered to me. Did I? Because from where I stood, I was just another thing you owned, another asset in your portfolio. Pretty wife, good at events, smiled when she was supposed to, and the second I stopped performing the way you wanted, you traded me in. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Damien? Tell me. Explain it to me. Make me understand how a man who supposedly loved me could do what you did. He couldn't, because there was no explanation that didn't make him sound like exactly what he was, a selfish bastard who'd wanted the shiny new thing and hadn't cared who he hurt to get it. I made a mistake, he said finally. Yes, you did, and now you have to live with it. The balcony door opened. Adrian Voss stepped out, concern creasing his face when he saw Elena. Everything all right? His voice was low, controlled, but Damien caught the edge in it. The warning. Fine, Elena said, not taking her eyes off Damien. Just catching up with my ex-husband. Adrian's gaze shifted to Damien, and there it was. Recognition, assessment, the kind of look one predator gives another when they're deciding if territory is about to be contested. Damien Moretti. Adrian extended a hand. Adrian Voss. I've heard a lot about you. The handshake was firm, professional, and absolutely a test of who would squeeze harder. Damien held his ground. So did Adrian. All bad, I'm sure, Etienne, Damien said. Elena doesn't speak badly of you. She doesn't speak of you at all, actually, which I think might be worse. Point to Voss. Adrian's hand moved to Elena's shoulder, a casual touch that somehow conveyed ownership without being possessive. You're shivering. Let's get you inside. In a minute. Elena looked at Damien one more time. This was good. Closure, I think. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Damien. I really do. But you're not going to find it with me. She turned. Adrian followed. The door closed behind them, and Damien was alone again with the cold in the city and the crushing weight of his own stupidity. He stayed out there for another 10 minutes, maybe 15, watching through the glass as Elena and Adrian moved through the ballroom, watching other people gravitate toward them, watching Elena laugh, touch Adrian's arm, glow with a happiness Damien had never been able to give her. When he finally went back inside, he lasted another 20 minutes before leaving through a side exit, getting in the car Carlo had waiting, and riding back to his empty penthouse in silence. Carlo didn't ask how it went. Didn't need to. Damien's face probably said it all. The apartment felt cavernous, 4,200 square feet of premium Manhattan real estate, and every inch of it screamed that no one actually lived here. Lived. Past tense. Damien existed here, slept here, kept his clothes here. But lived? No. He poured himself a drink. Then another. By the third, he was standing at the window watching the park, watching the lights, watching the city refuse to care about his problems. His phone buzzed, text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is Adrian Voss. We should talk. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. My office, address below." Damien stared at the message. Considered ignoring it. Considered telling Adrian Voss to go to hell. Considered a lot of things. Then he typed back, "Fine." He didn't sleep that night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through conversations that hadn't happened yet, arguments he'd already lost, apologies that wouldn't matter. By morning, he looked like hell. Carlo took one look at him and made coffee without being asked. "You're meeting with Voss today," Carlo said. Statement, not question. "How'd you know?" "Because you look like you're preparing for war, and the only person who'd make you look like that right now is him." "He wants to talk." "About what?" "Didn't say." Carlo set the coffee down. "You want backup? To a business meeting? Is that what this is?" No, they both knew it wasn't. "I'll handle it," Damien said. Adrian Voss's office was in Midtown's 63rd floor of a building that wore its wealth quietly. No gold fixtures, no marble lobby, just clean lines, expensive art, and the kind of understated elegance that only came with real money. The receptionist was expecting him. Led him down a hallway lined with photographs. Adrian with presidents, with CEOs, with people whose names shaped policy and moved markets. Damien recognized most of them, had done business with some, but seeing them all here, cataloged like trophies, drove home exactly how far out of his league he was. Adrian's office faced north, windows offering a view of Central Park that probably cost more than Damien made in a year. The man himself stood behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of walnut, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when Damien entered. "Thanks for coming." "You summoned. I showed up." "I requested. There's a difference." Adrian gestured to a chair. Damien sat, hated that it felt like a concession. "Can I offer you something? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine." "Suit yourself." Adrian sat as well, leaning back, completely at ease in a way that made Damien want to punch him. "I'll be direct. Elena doesn't know I'm having this conversation. She wouldn't approve, but I think it needs to happen anyway." "Why?" "Because you showing up last night upset her, not in the way you probably hoped, not with longing or regret or second thoughts, just upset, disrupted. And I don't like it when she's upset." Damien's jaw tightened. "So you're what, warning me off?" "I'm asking you to consider what you actually want here, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you want absolution. You want Elena to tell you it's okay, that she forgives you, that what you did wasn't unforgivable. And she's not going to do that. You don't know what I want, don't I? You're a powerful man, Mr. Moretti. You're used to getting what you want when you want it. But Elena isn't something you can buy or intimidate or negotiate your way back into. She made her choice. She chose to leave. She chose to rebuild. She chose me." The last part landed exactly how Adrian intended. Sharp, clean, brutal. "And what exactly are you to her?" Damien's voice came out harder than he meant. "Her savior? Her white knight? The perfect man who swooped in and fixed everything I broke? No. I'm the man who saw her for what she actually is, instead of what I needed her to be. That's the difference between us." Damien wanted to argue, wanted to tell Adrian he was wrong, that he was oversimplifying, that relationships were complicated and messy, and you couldn't reduce 5 years of marriage to a single failing. But he couldn't, because Adrian was right. "She's carrying my child," Damien said. "I know. She told me on our second date. Laid it all out. Said if I wasn't comfortable with it, she'd understand and we could part ways. You know what I said?" Damien didn't answer. "I said the child was part of her, which meant the child was someone I'd be privileged to know. That's it. No conditions, no hesitation, just acceptance." "Must be nice, being so perfect." Adrian laughed. Actually laughed. "I'm not perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes, failed at things, hurt people I cared about. The difference is I learned from it. I grew. I changed. You're sitting here angry at me for treating Elena well, and you can't even see how insane that is." "I'm not angry you're treating her well. I'm angry that I wasn't the one who did it." "Then do better. Be better. Not for her, for yourself, for your child, for whatever comes next in your life. Because this," Adrian gestured between them, "this thing where you show up and make her relive the worst period of her life, that's not love, that's ego, and Elena deserves more than your ego." Damien stood. He'd had enough. "We done here? One more thing." Adrian's voice stopped him at the door. "The baby, your child. What are your intentions?" "I don't know yet. Figure it out. Because if you're going to be in that kid's life, you need to commit to it, all the way. No half measures, no showing up when it's convenient and disappearing when it's hard. That child deserves better than that. And if I can't commit, then sign away your rights and let Elena build the family she deserves without you hanging over it like a ghost." Damien left without responding, got in the elevator, made it to the lobby, pushed through the revolving doors into December cold that felt like punishment. Carlo was waiting in the car. "How'd it go?" "Drive." They drove. Damien stared out the window, watching the city pass, thinking about everything Adrian had said, everything Elena had said, everything he'd done to get to this moment where he had money and power and absolutely nothing that mattered. His phone rang. Unknown number. "What?" "Mr. Moretti?" A woman's voice, professional, clipped. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen from Manhattan General. I have Elena Vale here. She asked me to call you." Damien's heart stopped. "What happened?" "She's fine. The baby's fine. But she had some cramping and came in as a precaution. She's being monitored. She said," a pause, papers rustling. "She said you have a right to know." "I'm on my way." He hung up, looked at Carlo. "Manhattan General, now." Carlo didn't ask questions, just drove, fast, cutting through traffic, running yellows, getting Damien there in 12 minutes when it should have taken 25. Damien burst through the emergency room doors, gave Elena's name, and was directed to a room on the 4th floor. He took the stairs. Couldn't wait for an elevator. Couldn't stand still. The room was private, quiet. Elena lay in a bed, monitors attached, an IV in her arm. She looked small, fragile, completely unlike the woman who'd stood on that balcony telling him exactly what she thought of him. Adrian sat in a chair beside her, holding her hand. Of course he was there. Of course. Elena's eyes opened when Damien walked in. "You came. You called." "I didn't. The doctor did. I told her to." "Why?" "Because regardless of everything else, this is your child. You should know if something's wrong." Adrian stood. "I'll give you 2 a minute." "You don't have to leave, Elena said. "Yes, I do." Adrian kissed her forehead, looked at Damien, nodded, left. Damien stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, feeling like an intruder in a moment that should have been his. "What happened?" he asked. "Braxton Hicks, false labor. Apparently it's normal. They're just monitoring to be safe." "You're okay?" "I'm fine." "The baby?" "Also fine. Heartbeat strong. Everything looks good." Damien exhaled, realized he'd been holding his breath. "You didn't have to come," Elena said. "Yes, I did." She studied him. "This doesn't change anything. You know that, right? You showing up here doesn't erase what happened. I know. And I'm still with Adrian. I'm still building a life that doesn't include you. I know that too. Then why are you here? Damien moved closer, sat in the chair Adrian had vacated, looked at Elena, really looked at her, and saw every mistake he'd ever made written in the careful distance she kept. Because you're right, he said quietly. I never showed up. Not when it mattered. Not when you needed me. I was too busy being angry that you weren't who I wanted you to be to realize you were exactly who I needed. Elena's eyes glistened. Damien, I'm not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for forgiveness. He stopped, started again. I'm just saying I see it now, what I did, what I threw away, and I'm sorry. For all of it. A tear slid down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly. Thank you. Can I? He gestured to her belly. Can I feel it? The baby? She hesitated, then nodded. Damien reached out, placed his hand on the swell of her stomach, and felt movement. A kick. Small. Definite. His child. His son or daughter. A whole person he'd helped create and then abandoned before they even existed. Strong, he whispered. Takes after me, Elena said, and there was the ghost of a smile. They sat like that for a minute. 2. Damien's hand on her belly, feeling his child move, understanding for the first time what he'd actually done. Not just losing Elena, but choosing to lose this. This moment, this connection, this chance to be something more than a man who took what he wanted and discarded what he didn't. Adrian appeared in the doorway. Damien pulled his hand back. They're discharging her, Adrian said. Everything checks out. Damien stood. Good, that's good. He moved toward the door, stopped, looked back. Elena? Yeah? When the baby comes, if you want me there, if you think I should be, I'll be there. However you want me there, or not at all. Whatever you decide. But I want you to know the option's there. Elena nodded slowly. I'll think about it. It wasn't much, but it was more than he deserved. Damien left, found Carlo in the waiting room. They drove back to the penthouse in silence. That night, Damien sat in his office, pulled out a sheet of paper, and started making a list. All the things he'd done wrong, all the ways he'd failed, all the moments he could have chosen differently. The list took 3 pages. When he was done, he stared at it. Wondered if you could change. If a man like him, built on ego and control and the absolute certainty that he knew best, could actually become something else. He didn't have an answer. But for the first time in his life, Damien Moretti was willing to try. The list stayed on Damien's desk for 3 days. He'd look at it between meetings, between phone calls, between the 100 small decisions that made up running an empire built on fear and money. 3 pages of failures. 3 pages of proof that he'd been exactly the kind of man he'd always sworn he'd never become. On the 4th day, he called his lawyer. I need you to draw up papers, Damien said, staring out his office window at a city that didn't care about his problems. What kind of papers? Marcus Webb had been Damien's attorney for 6 years, handled everything from business contracts to the occasional police problem that needed to disappear. He knew better than to ask questions, but he asked anyway. Custody, visitation, child support, whatever the hell you call it when you want to do right by a kid you haven't even met yet. Silence on the other end, then, you're serious? Do I sound like I'm joking? No, but you sound like a man who's making decisions at 3 a.m. after too much scotch. It was 2 p.m. and Damien hadn't touched a drink in 4 days, but he didn't bother correcting Marcus. Just draw up the papers. Fair terms. More than fair. Whatever Elena wants. Does Elena know you're doing this? Not yet. Damien, draw up the papers, Marcus. I'll handle the rest. He hung up, sat in the silence of his office. Thought about the feeling of his child moving under his palm in that hospital room. Thought about Elena's face when she'd said, takes after me, like it was obvious the kid would have her strength because Damien sure as hell hadn't contributed any. His phone buzzed. Text from Carlo. Problem at the Bronx warehouse. You want me to handle it? 3 months ago, Damien would have gone himself. Would have walked in, made an example of whoever was stealing or skimming or generally being stupid, and walked out with everyone understanding exactly who ran things. Now he just texted back, "Handle it." He had other things to think about. That night, Damien did something he hadn't done in years. He went to a bookstore. Not the kind where business executives bought airport thrillers. An actual bookstore. The kind with wooden shelves and the smell of paper and a section in the back labeled Parenting. He stood in that section for 20 minutes, staring at titles like What to Expect When You're Expecting and The New Father's Playbook and Pregnancy for Dads, feeling completely out of his depth. A woman in her 30s, visibly pregnant, reached past him for a book on breastfeeding. "First kid?" she asked, smiling. "Yeah." "Congratulations, it's terrifying." "That obvious?" You've been staring at the same shelf for 15 minutes without picking up a single book. Either it's your first or you're planning to steal something. Despite everything, Damien laughed. "Any recommendations?" She pulled down a book. Blue cover, simple title, Fatherhood, the Truth. "This one doesn't sugarcoat it. Tells you straight what you're getting into. I bought it for my husband. He said it was the only one that didn't make him feel like an idiot." Damien took it. "Thanks." "Good luck," she said, and something in her voice made it sound like she meant it. He bought 3 books. Read the first one that night, cover to cover, sitting in his apartment with coffee going cold beside him. Learned things he should have already known. About trimesters. About fetal development. About what Elena's body had been going through while he'd been too busy replacing her to care. By chapter 6, he felt sick. By chapter 10, he understood exactly how badly he'd failed. The book talked about being present, about supporting your partner, about the fear and exhaustion and overwhelming nature of growing a human being. It talked about showing up, being there, doing the small things that mattered because everything mattered when you were building a life. Damien had done none of it. He'd done the opposite. He'd taken a woman who was vulnerable and scared and going through something massive, and he'd made it about himself, about his needs, about his image, about the fact that she wasn't fun anymore. The book dropped from his hands. He sat there in the dark, expensive apartment that suddenly felt like a prison and understood that Adrian had been too kind. Damien wasn't just selfish. He was cruel. And the cruelty had been casual, thoughtless, the kind that came from never considering that other people's feelings were as real as his own. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Yeah." "Mr. Moretti? This is Patricia Herrera. I'm an event coordinator working with Elena Vale." Damien sat up straighter. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. She asked me to call you. She's hosting a small gathering this Saturday. Baby shower. Very intimate. Just close friends and family. She wanted to know if you'd like to attend." The question landed like a punch. Elena was inviting him to her baby shower. His baby shower. Their baby shower. After everything. Yes. Yeah, I'll be there." "Wonderful. I'll email you the details. It's at Mr. Voss's residence. 2:00, casual dress." She hung up. Damien stared at his phone, trying to process what had just happened. Elena had invited him. Not because she had to. Not because there was legal obligation or social pressure. She'd chosen to include him in this moment, this celebration, this piece of joy that by all rights he'd forfeited when he'd walked away. He didn't deserve it. He knew that. But he was going anyway. Saturday arrived cold and bright, one of those December days where the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. Damien stood outside Adrian Voss's building, because of course Adrian owned the whole building, not just an apartment in it, and tried to convince himself to go inside. Carlo had offered to come. Damien had said no. This wasn't the kind of thing you brought muscle to. The doorman recognized him. "Mr. Moretti, Ms. Vale is expecting you. Penthouse. Elevators on the left." The elevator was the kind that required a key. The kind where you didn't press a floor. You just went to the one floor you had access to. It opened directly into Adrian's apartment, and Damien stepped out into a space that made his own place look like a shoebox. Floor-to-ceiling windows, art that belonged in museums, furniture that probably cost more than cars. But somehow, it didn't feel cold. There were plants, books, a blanket thrown over a couch like someone actually sat there. Signs of life in a way Damien's apartment had never managed. Voices came from deeper in the apartment, laughter. Music playing softly. Damien followed the sound to a living room full of people he didn't recognize. 20, maybe 25 guests. Women, mostly, but some men. Everyone holding champagne or sparkling water, everyone smiling, everyone looking like they belonged at exactly this kind of gathering. And there, in the center of it all, was Elena. She wore a dress the color of cream, fitted over her belly, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was laughing at something an older woman was saying, one hand resting on her stomach in that unconscious gesture Damien had seen a dozen times now. She looked radiant. That was the word people always used for pregnant women, and Damien had always thought it was bullshit. But looking at Elena now, he understood. She saw him. The laughter faded. For a second, Damien thought she might ask him to leave, might have changed her mind, might realize this was a mistake. Then she smiled, small, careful, but real. Damien, you came. You invited me. I did. She crossed to him, moving carefully in heels that were probably a bad idea at 7.5 months pregnant. I'm glad you're here. The words felt impossible. You are? Yes. This is your child too. You should be part of this. Adrian appeared at her elbow, carrying 2 glasses of sparkling water. He handed one to Elena, acknowledged Damien with a nod that wasn't quite friendly but wasn't hostile either. Just neutral, watchful. Moretti. Voss. Can I get you something to drink? I'm fine. An awkward silence settled. Elena looked between them, clearly trying to figure out how to navigate this situation she'd created. Patricia's about to start the games, she said finally. You should join us. Games. Damien had never been to a baby shower, had no idea what games meant in this context. But he followed Elena into the dining room where chairs were set up in a circle and people were settling in with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested they actually enjoyed whatever was about to happen. He ended up between a woman named Claire, who did something in finance, and a man named Michael, who turned out to be Adrian's brother. Michael shook Damien's hand with a grip that was firm without being aggressive. So you're the ex, Michael said quietly. That obvious? Elena mentioned you might come, said it was complicated. That's one word for it. For what it's worth, I think it's good you're here. Kids need their fathers, even the complicated ones. Damien didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The games turned out to be a series of activities that ranged from mildly embarrassing to completely ridiculous. Guessing baby food flavors while blindfolded. A contest to see who could change a diaper the fastest on a doll that was disturbingly realistic. Trivia about pregnancy and child development that Damien failed spectacularly, but he tried. He participated. He laughed when he got things wrong, accepted teasing from people who didn't know him, and slowly, gradually, started to feel less like an intruder and more like someone who had a right to be there. Elena watched him. He caught her looking a few times, expression unreadable, and wondered what she was thinking, if she regretted inviting him, if she was surprised he'd shown up, if she was remembering all the times he hadn't shown up when it mattered. Halfway through the party, she stood and raised her glass. I want to thank everyone for coming, for celebrating this baby with me, for being part of this journey. She paused. Her eyes found Adrian. Especially Adrian, who took on something he didn't have to and has been more supportive than I ever imagined was possible. Adrian smiled, stood, crossed to her, kissed her temple. The room made appreciative noises. Then Elena's eyes found Damien. And thank you to Damien for coming today, for being willing to be part of this child's life. It takes courage to show up after... She stopped, started again. It takes courage to show up, so thank you. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't absolution, but it was acknowledgement, and that was more than Damien had expected. After the toast, people broke into smaller groups. Damien found himself near the windows, looking out at the city, when Patricia approached with a clipboard. Mr. Moretti, I have some documents for you. He turned. Documents? She handed him an envelope. From Ms. Vale. She asked me to give these to you today. Damien opened it. Inside were the papers Marcus had drawn up. The custody agreement. The child support terms. Everything Damien had told his lawyer to prepare. But they'd been modified. Elena had crossed out sections, added notes, changed numbers. At the bottom, she'd written in neat handwriting, "These are my terms. Take them or leave them. He scanned the changes. She'd reduced the child support amount, struck out some of the visitation restrictions, added a clause about decision-making that gave them equal say in major choices. Another clause about flexibility, about working together, about putting the child first. It was fair. More than fair. It was generous in a way that made Damien's chest tight. He looked up. Elena stood across the room, talking to Claire and another woman, but her eyes were on him, waiting. Damien crossed to her. The other women tactfully moved away. "You changed the terms," he said quietly. "You offered too much. I don't need your money, Damien. I need you to be present, to show up, to be a parent. These terms, they're more than I deserve, probably. But this isn't about what you deserve. It's about what our child deserves. And our child deserves parents who can work together, who can put aside their history and focus on the future." "You really think we can do that?" Elena's hand moved to her belly. "I think we have to try, for this baby, for the person we created. We don't get to mess this up because we couldn't get past our own issues." She was right. Of course she was right. "I'll sign them," Damien said. "Good. Marcus can handle the filing." "You talked to Marcus?" "I called him last week, told him what I wanted. He was surprisingly cooperative." Of course she'd called Marcus. Of course she'd taken control of the situation. That was Elena. That had always been Elena. She saw problems, and she fixed them, and Damien had been too stupid to appreciate it when he had her. "Elena? Mr. Voss?" They both turned. An older man stood nearby, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of bearing that suggested importance. He nodded to Elena. "Might I borrow Adrian for a moment? Business matter. Won't take long." "Of course," Elena smiled, watched Adrian follow the man into what looked like a study. Damien and Elena stood in awkward silence. "He's good to you," Damien said finally. "Adrian, I can see it." "He is. Does he make you happy?" "Yes." "Good. You deserve that." Elena looked at him, really looked at him. "Do you mean that?" "I'm trying to." "Trying?" "I'm not going to lie and say I'm thrilled about it. About him. About the fact that he gets to be there, for all the things I should have been there for. But yeah, I mean it. You deserve to be happy. You deserved it when you were with me, and I failed to give you that. I'm glad someone else didn't fail." Something shifted in Elena's expression. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but maybe understanding, maybe recognition that Damien was actually trying to change, instead of just saying he would. "I hated you for a while," she said quietly. "After you left. After you paraded Vivian around like I was nothing. I hated you so much I couldn't breathe sometimes." The words cut, but Damien didn't flinch. He'd earned them. "But I don't hate you anymore," Elena continued. "I can't. Because hating you means giving you power over me, and I'm done doing that. So I let it go. I let you go. And I built something new. With Adrian. With myself first. Adrian came later, but yes, with him too. He loves you. I know. Do you love him?" Elena's hand tightened on her glass. "That's not your business. I know, I'm asking anyway." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I care about him deeply. I trust him. I respect him. And yes, I think I'm falling in love with him. It's different than what we had. Slower, more intentional. Less about passion and more about partnership." "Sounds boring," Elena laughed. Actually, laughed. "It's not. It's just adult, mature, built on actually knowing each other instead of assuming we did." Damien absorbed that. "Did I ever really know you?" "No. You knew the version of me you wanted me to be. You never bothered to learn who I actually was." "And Adrian did. Adrian asked questions. He listened to the answers. He cared about what I thought and felt and needed. Revolutionary concept, I know." The sarcasm landed soft, but it still stung. "I'm sorry," Damien said, "for all of it, for not seeing you, for not valuing you, for treating you like you were disposable when you were the best thing I ever had." Elena's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly. "Don't do this here," Do what? Make me cry at my own baby shower. People will think something's wrong. Something is wrong. I screwed up the best thing in my life, and I can't fix it, and I have to live with that. Damien, but I can be better going forward. For the baby. I can show up. I can be present. I can try to be the kind of father our kid deserves, even though I have no idea how to do that. A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. She wiped it away quickly. You're really going to try? Yeah, I am. What changed? Good question. Damien thought about the hospital room, about Adrian's office, about 3 pages of failures in a book about fatherhood that had gutted him. I saw what I was becoming, and I didn't like it, so I'm trying to become something else. Elena studied him. People don't change, Damien. Not really. They just get better at hiding who they are. Then I guess we'll find out if I'm the exception or the rule. Adrian returned, reading the room immediately. His hand found Elena's back. Everything all right? Fine, Elena said, composing herself. Damien was just leaving. She wasn't asking, she was telling. The conversation was over. Right, Damien said. Thank you for inviting me. It meant a lot. I'll have Marcus send the final papers once we've both signed. Sounds good. He moved toward the elevator, stopped, turned back. Elena? Yeah? When the baby comes, I want to be there, in the hospital. I won't get in the way, won't make demands, won't do anything except be there. But I want to meet my kid when they arrive, if that's okay with you. Elena looked at Adrian. Some silent communication passed between them. Adrian nodded slightly. Okay, Elena said. You can be there. Thank you. The elevator doors closed on a room full of people celebrating a baby that was half his, a woman he'd lost, and a man who'd proven to be everything Damien hadn't been. On the way down, Damien pulled out his phone and texted Marcus. I'll sign the papers, send them over. Then he texted Carlo. I need you to look into something. Quietly. No questions. What? Therapists. The kind that help people who don't know how to be human. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. On it, boss. The car ride back to his apartment was quiet. Damien watched the city scroll past, thinking about Elena's words. People don't change. Maybe she was right. Maybe he couldn't fundamentally alter who he was at his core. But he could try to be better. He could make different choices. He could show up when it mattered instead of only when it was convenient. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something. And for now, something was all he had. That night, Damien sat at his desk and wrote a letter, not an email, an actual letter, on paper, with a pen. It took him 4 tries to get the words right. Elena, thank you for today, for inviting me, for giving me a chance I don't deserve. I know I can't fix what I broke. I know I can't undo the hurt I caused. But I can promise you this. I will show up for our child. I will be present. I will try every day to be the kind of father who deserves to have a kid call him dad. I'm sorry for everything, for leaving, for choosing wrong, for not seeing what I had until it was gone. You were always enough, more than enough. I was just too broken to recognize it. I hope Adrian knows how lucky he is. I hope he never makes the mistakes I made. I hope he gives you the life you deserve. Take care of yourself and the baby. I'll see you when the baby comes. Damien. He sealed it in an envelope, addressed it, didn't send it. Instead, he put it in a drawer. Maybe someday he'd give it to her. Maybe someday he'd burn it. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was he'd written it. He'd acknowledged what he'd done. He'd taken responsibility. It was a start. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning while Damien was in a meeting with 3 distributors who owed him money, his phone rang. Elena's number. He answered immediately, ignoring the confused looks from the men across the table. Elena? It's happening. Her voice was tight, controlled, but he could hear the fear underneath. I'm at Manhattan General. Labor started 2 hours ago. If you're coming, come now. I'm on my way. He hung up, stood, looked at the 3 men who were very carefully not reacting to the fact that Damien Moretti had just abandoned a negotiation mid-sentence. Carlo will finish this, Damien said, already moving. He was out the door before anyone could respond. The drive to the hospital was the longest 20 minutes of his life. Traffic was murder. Every light was red. Every pedestrian walked too slow. By the time Carlo pulled up to the emergency entrance, Damien was ready to jump out of a moving car. He ran inside, gave Elena's name, was directed to the maternity ward, 3rd floor, room 312. When he got there, Adrian was in the hallway, pacing. "How is she?" Damien asked, slightly out of breath. "Good. She's good. It's progressing fast. Doctor said maybe another hour." "And you're out here because?" She asked for a minute, said she needed to focus. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. For the first time since Damien had met him, Adrian Voss looked rattled. "I've never felt more useless in my life." Despite everything, Damien almost smiled. "Welcome to fatherhood." "I'm not—" Adrian stopped. "I'm not the father. You're the one who's been there. That makes you the father in every way that counts." Adrian looked at him. "That might be the most generous thing you've ever said to me." "Don't get used to it." A nurse appeared. "Mr. Moretti, Miss Vale is asking for you." Damien's heart stopped. "Me?" "Yes, sir. Room 312. He looked at Adrian. Adrian nodded. "Go." Damien pushed through the door into a room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Elena was in a hospital bed, monitors beeping, 4 attached, face flushed and sweaty. She looked exhausted. She looked beautiful. "You came," she said. "You called. I wasn't sure you would. Elena, I would have walked here if I had to." She smiled, winced, a contraction maybe. "It's happening fast. Doctor says maybe 30 minutes. You scared. Terrified. You're the strongest person I know. You'll be fine." "Will you stay? Just until the baby comes?" "Yeah, of course." He pulled a chair close to the bed, sat, took her hand when she reached for his during the next contraction, letting her squeeze hard enough to hurt. They didn't talk much, didn't need to, just sat there, 2 people who'd failed each other in every way that mattered, holding hands while they waited to meet the person who'd tied them together forever, whether they liked it or not. 37 minutes later, a Dr. Damien didn't recognize walked in with 2 nurses and said words like fully dilated and ready to push. Adrian appeared in the doorway. Elena looked at him, looked at Damien. "Both of you should," she said. "I want both of you here." So they stayed. Damien on one side, Adrian on the other, while Elena did the hardest thing a human body can do and brought new life into the world. And when the baby finally arrived, screaming and red and absolutely perfect, Damien felt something crack open in his chest that he didn't have words for. "It's a girl," the doctor said, placing the baby on Elena's chest. "A daughter." Damien had a daughter. Elena was crying. Adrian was crying. Damien realized he was crying too. The baby quieted when Elena touched her. Just stopped crying. Like she recognized her mother's voice, her mother's heartbeat, her mother's hands. "She's perfect," Elena whispered. "She's perfect," Adrian echoed. Damien couldn't speak, could only stare at this tiny person, this brand new human, and understand that nothing in his life had prepared him for this moment. Elena looked up at him. "Do you want to hold her?" I've never, neither have I. We'll figure it out together." A nurse showed him how, where to put his hands, how to support the head, how to not drop the most precious thing he'd ever held. And then his daughter was in his arms, looking up at him with dark eyes that didn't focus yet, and Damien understood what people meant when they said love at first sight. This was it. This was the thing. This was why people changed, why they tried to be better, why they fought to become something more than what they were. "Hi," he whispered. "I'm your dad, and I promise I'm going to do better. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there. I'm going to try every single day to deserve you." The baby made a small noise. Maybe agreement, maybe gas. Damien didn't care. He looked at Elena. "Thank you. For this. For her. For letting me be here. Thank you for coming." Damien handed the baby back carefully, watched as Adrian took his turn holding her, watched as this man who'd been more of a father in 8 months than Damien had been in a lifetime cradled her like she was made of glass. And Damien understood, standing in that hospital room watching the woman he'd lost and the man who'd found her and the daughter they'd all somehow share, that this was his second chance. Not with Elena. That ship had sailed. But with this baby. With this little girl who didn't know yet that her father was a selfish bastard who'd thrown away everything good in his life. She'd learn eventually. Kids always did. But until then, Damien was going to try. Going to show up. Going to be the kind of father who maybe, someday, she'd be proud to call dad. It wasn't redemption. But it was a start. They named her Sophia. Elena's choice. Damien had no argument. He'd forfeited the right to name his daughter the moment he'd walked away from her mother. The first week was chaos. Elena and the baby stayed in the hospital for 3 days while doctors monitored them both, ran tests, made sure everything was healing properly. Damien showed up every day. Brought coffee. Elena couldn't drink because she was breastfeeding. Brought flowers that made the room smell less like disinfectant. Sat in the uncomfortable chair by the window and watched Sophia sleep in her bassinet, marveling at how something so small could breathe, could exist, could be real. Adrian was there more. That was fair. He'd earned it. But he never made Damien feel like an intruder. Just nodded when Damien arrived, made space, understood that whatever complicated situation they'd created, it started and ended with what was best for Sophia. On day 2, a nurse showed Damien how to change a diaper. He failed 3 times before getting it right, and Sophia peed on him during attempt number 4. Elena laughed so hard she started crying, and even Adrian cracked a smile. "Welcome to parenthood," the nurse said, handing Damien paper towels. "It only gets messier from here." She wasn't wrong. When Elena was finally discharged, Adrian's car was waiting. Black SUV, car seat already installed, driver who'd clearly done this before. Damien watched them load Sophia into the car seat, watched Elena fuss over the straps, watched Adrian's hand rest protectively on her shoulder. "You can visit tomorrow," Elena said, seeing Damien's face. "Come by around 2. She should be awake then." "Okay." "And Damien, bring the papers. The signed custody agreement. We should make it official." He nodded. Watched the SUV pull away. Stood on the sidewalk in the January cold, feeling like he'd just lost something he'd never really had. Carlo picked him up 10 minutes later. "How's the baby?" Carlo asked. "Perfect. Terrifying. I have no idea what I'm doing." "Nobody does. That's the point." "You got kids?" 3. 2 boys and a girl, ages 12, 9, and 6. Damien stared. "I've known you 8 years. You never mentioned you had kids. You never asked." Fair point. Damien never asked about anyone's personal life, didn't care, didn't want to know. People were tools, assets, means to ends. You didn't ask tools about their families. "Are you good at it?" Damien asked. "Being a father?" Carlo was quiet for a long moment. "Some days. Other days I screw up. Lose my temper, work too much, miss things I shouldn't miss. But I show up. I try. That's all you can do. And if trying isn't enough, then you try harder." That night, Damien sat in his apartment with the custody papers spread across his desk. Marcus had sent them over that afternoon, flagged everywhere Damien needed to sign. Elena had already signed her sections. Her handwriting was neat, precise, completely controlled. He read through the terms again. Joint legal custody, primary physical custody to Elena, which made sense since Damien had no idea how to care for an infant. Visitation schedule that started with supervised visits and gradually increased as Sophia got older. Child support set at a reasonable amount that was probably 1/10 of what Damien could afford, but apparently all Elena would accept. A clause about major decisions requiring mutual agreement. Another about neither parent speaking negatively about the other in Sophia's presence. Another about flexibility, understanding that plans would change, that rigidity helped no one. It was fair. More than fair. It gave Damien a chance to be a father while acknowledging he hadn't earned the right to equal footing. He signed every page, initialed every change, put the papers in an envelope to bring to Elena tomorrow. Then he pulled out his phone and called the number Carlo had sent him 3 weeks ago. Dr. Rebecca Santos, therapist, specialized in high-functioning individuals with control issues, which was apparently a nice way of saying she dealt with assholes who ran criminal empires and needed to learn basic human emotions. The phone rang 4 times. Damien almost hung up. Dr. Santos. Hi. Yeah, I was given your number. I think I need help. What kind of help? The kind where I learn how to be a decent person. Father, human being, whatever. I see. Can you tell me a bit about what's prompting this? I have a daughter, born 3 days ago, and I realized I have no idea how to be what she needs, what anyone needs. I'm good at making money and hurting people who cross me, and that's pretty much it. That's very honest. Yeah, well, honesty's about all I've got right now. I have an opening Thursday at 4. Does that work? Yeah, I'll be there. He hung up, stared at his phone, wondered if this was what rock bottom felt like, or if there were deeper levels he hadn't discovered yet. The next day, Damien showed up at Adrian's building at exactly 2 o'clock, carrying the signed papers and a stuffed elephant he'd bought at a toy store in Soho. The woman at the store had assured him it was age appropriate. Damien had no idea what that meant, but trusted her anyway. The doorman waved him through. The elevator required a code this time. Adrian had texted it that morning, along with a message that just said, "Second bedroom on the left, knock first." Damien knocked, heard Elena's voice say, "Come in." The room was smaller than he'd expected. Soft lighting, cream-colored walls, a crib in the corner, a changing table, a rocking chair by the window. Elena sat in the chair, Sophia in her arms, nursing. "Sorry," Damien said, immediately looking away. "I can come back." "Don't be ridiculous. Sit down." "She's almost done." He sat on the small couch against the wall, still not looking directly at them, feeling awkward in a way he hadn't felt since he was 16. "It's just feeding, Damien. You're going to have to get used to it. I know, I just didn't want to intrude. You're her father. You can't intrude." Sophia made a small sound. Elena shifted her, burped her with practiced efficiency, then adjusted her clothes and stood. "You want to hold her?" "Yeah, if that's okay." Elena placed Sophia in his arms. The baby was awake this time, eyes open, looking around with the unfocused gaze of someone who couldn't see much beyond shapes and shadows. She was heavier than he remembered, more solid, more real. "Hi, sweetheart," Damien whispered. "Remember me?" Sophia yawned. Damien decided to take that as a yes. Elena sat back in the rocker, watching them. "You brought papers?" "Yeah." He nodded toward the envelope on the couch. "All signed. Marcus said he'd file them this week." "Good. And I brought this." He gestured with his chin toward the stuffed elephant. "I know she can't really play with it yet, but the lady at the store said it was safe, and I thought, I don't know. I wanted to bring something." Elena picked up the elephant, smiled. "It's perfect. Thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Sophia started to fuss. Elena took her back, rocked her gently until she settled. "I started seeing a therapist," Damien said. Elena's head came up. "You what?" "A therapist. Someone who's supposed to help me figure out how to be less of an asshole. First appointment is Thursday." "Damien, wow, that's really good. Yeah, well, I figure if I'm going to do this, I should probably learn how to do it right. And right now I don't know anything except how to screw things up. You're here. That's not nothing. It's the bare minimum. I owe you more than the bare minimum." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "You're really trying, aren't you?" "I'm trying to try. Not sure if that counts." "It counts." Adrian appeared in the doorway carrying 2 mugs. "Coffee for Elena, decaf unfortunately, and regular for you, Moretti. Figured you could use it." Damien took the mug. "Thanks." Adrian sat on the arm of Elena's chair, his hand finding her shoulder in that casual gesture of intimacy that Damien was slowly getting used to seeing. They looked like a family, the 3 of them in this room with Sophia. It hurt less than Damien expected, maybe because it felt right in a way his and Elena's marriage never had. "We should talk about the visitation schedule," Adrian said. "What works for you?" "Whatever works for you guys. I'm flexible. You run a business empire. You're not that flexible." Damien almost smiled. "I'm making it flexible. Carlo can handle most of the day-to-day stuff. I'm stepping back." Elena's eyebrows rose. "You're stepping back from work?" "Not entirely, but I'm delegating more, focusing on what matters. Turns out most of the stuff I thought was critical really isn't. What prompted that? This. Damien looked at Sophia. She did. I don't want to be the father who's never around, who shows up for birthdays and graduations and nothing in between. I want to actually know my kid. Adrian and Elena exchanged a glance, some silent communication Damien couldn't read. The schedule in the agreement starts with supervised visits, Elena said carefully. 2 hours, 3 times a week. Does that work? Who supervises? Either me or Adrian, just until you're comfortable handling her on your own. That's fair. When do we start? Whenever you want. Tomorrow? Elena smiled. Tomorrow works. They talked logistics, times, locations, what Damien needed to have at his apartment, bottles, diapers, a safe place for Sophia to sleep, things he hadn't thought about but should have. Elena made a list. Adrian added to it. Damien took notes in his phone like he was preparing for a business meeting instead of figuring out how to care for a human baby. When Sophia got fussy again, Damien stood to leave. Same time tomorrow? He asked. Same time tomorrow, Elena confirmed. He made it to the elevator before Adrian caught up with him. Moretti, wait. Damien turned. Yeah? Adrian looked uncomfortable. I just wanted to say, what you're doing, the therapy, the effort, it's good, it's right, and I appreciate it. You don't have to thank me for doing the bare minimum. I'm not thanking you, I'm acknowledging it. There's a difference. Adrian paused. Elena's been through a lot, more than she should have had to go through, and I know you know that. I know you carry that. But the fact that you're actually trying to change instead of just saying you will, that matters. I'm not doing it for you. I know, you're doing it for Sophia. That's exactly why it matters. They stood in the hallway, 2 men who had every reason to hate each other, finding something like mutual respect instead. She's lucky, Damien said quietly. Elena, to have found you. I'm the lucky one. She's... Adrian stopped. She's everything. Yeah, she is. I just wish I'd figured that out when it mattered. You can't change the past. You can only do better going forward. Everybody keeps saying that. Because it's true. The elevator dinged. Damien stepped inside. Take care of them. Both of them. Always. The next 3 months became a routine. Damien showed up at Adrian's building 3 times a week. Spent 2 hours with Sophia while Elena or Adrian hovered nearby, making sure he didn't accidentally kill his daughter through sheer incompetence. He learned how to hold her properly, how to read her cries, how to know when she was hungry versus tired versus just mad at the universe for no particular reason. He learned that babies were terrible at sleeping, that they required constant vigilance, that everything leaked, milk, spit up, other fluids he didn't want to think about. He learned patience he didn't know he had, developed skills he'd never needed before, found parts of himself that had been buried under years of being exactly who he'd thought he needed to be. Therapy helped. Dr. Santos didn't coddle him, didn't accept excuses, pushed him to examine why he'd made the choices he'd made, what he'd been running from, what he'd been trying to prove. It was uncomfortable, sometimes painful, but necessary. You built an empire, she said during their 8th session. But you built it on fear, yours and everyone else's, and fear's a lousy foundation because eventually the cracks show. So what do I build on instead? What do you think? I don't know. That's why I'm paying you. You're paying me to help you figure it out yourself, so think. What makes you feel solid, grounded, real? Damien thought about Sophia's weight in his arms, about the way she'd started recognizing him, smiling when he walked in the room, about the fierce protectiveness that rose in his chest when he held her. My daughter, he said, she makes me feel real. Then build on that. So he did, slowly, imperfectly, with setbacks and mistakes and moments where he wanted to quit because it was too hard and he didn't know what he was doing. But he kept showing up, kept trying, kept learning. By March, the supervised visits became unsupervised. Damien could take Sophia to his apartment for a few hours. He'd baby-proofed the place. Corner guards, outlet covers, a crib he'd assembled himself after watching 3 YouTube videos. Carlo had laughed when he saw it. It's crooked, Carlo said. It's not crooked. Boss, it's definitely crooked. It holds a baby. That's all it needs to do. They'd fixed it together, Carlo showing Damien how to properly tighten bolts, how to make sure the mattress sat level, how to do basic construction without screwing it up. Turned out Carlo was good at this stuff, patient, helpful, almost like he'd done it before. "Thank you," Damien said when they finished. "For what?" "For not being an asshole about the fact that I don't know what I'm doing. We all start somewhere. You're doing fine." Sophia's first visit to Damien's apartment lasted 4 hours. She cried for the first 30 minutes, clearly upset that nothing looked or smelled familiar. Damien walked her around, showed her the windows, the city view, talked to her in a low voice about nothing in particular until she calmed down. They sat on the couch together. Damien fed her a bottle Elena had prepared, burped her, changed her diaper twice, put her down for a nap in the crooked crib that actually wasn't crooked anymore, watched her sleep and felt something settle in his chest that he couldn't name. When Elena came to pick her up, she looked around the apartment with obvious surprise. "You really did baby-proof. You said to." "I know. I guess I didn't think you'd actually do it this thoroughly." "I don't half-ass things." "No, you really don't." She picked up Sophia, who was awake again and making grabby hands at her mother. "How'd it go?" "Good." She cried at first but settled down, took her bottle fine, slept for an hour. "Any problems?" "Nope." Elena looked at him, really looked. "You're getting good at this." "I'm getting better, still got a long way to go." "We all do." She left. Damien stood in his too-quiet apartment surrounded by evidence that a baby had been there. Bottles in the sink, burp cloth on the couch, tiny socks that had somehow ended up under the coffee table, and realized he felt more at home in this mess than he'd ever felt in the pristine emptiness before. April brought Sophia's 4-month checkup. Elena asked if Damien wanted to come. He did. They met at the pediatrician's office, a cheerful place with cartoon animals on the walls and a waiting room full of exhausted parents. Adrian was traveling, business in Singapore. So it was just Damien and Elena sitting side by side while Sophia got examined, measured, weighed, pronounced healthy, and developing normally. "She's strong," the doctor said, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. "Good muscle tone, tracking objects well. You're doing a great job." "Thank you," Elena said. "Both of you," the doctor added, looking at Damien. "It's good that Dad's involved. Kids need both parents when possible." The words landed warm, affirming, like maybe Damien was actually succeeding at this thing he'd been convinced he'd fail at. Afterward, they got coffee. Real coffee for Damien, decaf for Elena, who was still nursing. Sat in a shop near the doctor's office while Sophia slept in her stroller. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said. "Yeah." "Are you happy?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy with your life, with how things are? You've changed a lot in 4 months, given up a lot. I just wonder if you're okay with it." Damien thought about it, really thought. "I don't know if happy is the right word. I'm not miserable. I don't hate my life. I don't wake up every day wishing things were different. But I'm lonely, most of the time. The apartment's too big, too quiet, and work doesn't fill the space the way it used to. Have you thought about dating?" "Not really. Hard to date when you're still in love with your ex-wife." The words came out before he could stop them. Elena's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "Damien, I know you're with Adrian. I know you're happy. I know I don't get to have an opinion about any of that. But you asked if I was happy, and the truth is I'm not. Because the person I want to be happy with has moved on, and I don't blame her, but that doesn't make it hurt less." Elena was quiet for a long time. Sophia shifted in her stroller, made small sleeping noises. "I care about you," Elena said finally. "I always will. You're Sophia's father. We're going to be in each other's lives forever. But I can't be what you need, Damien. I can't be your second chance or your redemption or the thing that makes you feel less lonely." "I know." "Do you? Because it sounds like you're waiting for something that's never going to happen." "I'm not waiting. I'm being honest. You asked, so I'm telling you." "Then let me be honest too. What we had, it wasn't good. Not really. We were young and stupid, and we thought intensity meant love. But it didn't. It meant drama, chaos. Two broken people trying to fix each other and making everything worse. I wasn't trying to fix you. No, you were trying to control me, shape me into something that fit your life. And I let you because I didn't know any better. The words stung because they were true. Adrian doesn't try to control me, Elena continued. He doesn't need me to be anything other than what I am. And that's what love should be, not possession, not ownership, just acceptance. He's better than me. He's better for me. There's a difference. Damien absorbed that. So what do I do? Just accept that I'm always going to be alone? You move on. You find someone who fits your life now instead of the life you used to have. You stop living in the past and start building a future. Easier said than done. Most things worth doing are. They finished their coffee in silence. When Elena left with Sophia, Damien sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching people come and go, wondering if any of them were as lost as he felt. That night, he did something he hadn't done in months. He went out. Real club, not one of his. Dressed nice, showed up alone, ordered drinks he didn't finish, watched people dance and laugh and connect in ways that seemed easy for them and impossible for him. A woman approached him, beautiful, mid-20s, wearing a dress that cost serious money. "You look lonely," she said. "I am." "Want company?" He looked at her, really looked. Saw someone young and pretty and probably interested in exactly the kind of night Damien used to offer. No strings, no feelings, just bodies and pleasure and forgetting. "Thanks," he said. "But no." "You sure? I'm very good company." "I'm sure, but I'm not looking for that anymore." She shrugged, moved on, found someone else within minutes. Damien left, went home, stood in his apartment that now had a crib and baby supplies and evidence that he was trying to be someone different. His phone buzzed. Text from Elena. "Sophia's asking for you." Well, not asking, but she keeps looking at the door like she's waiting for someone. "I think she misses you." Damien stared at the message. Read it 3 times. His daughter missed him. This tiny person who'd only existed for 4 months missed him when he wasn't there. He texted back, "Can I see her tomorrow? Even just for an hour? Come for breakfast." 9 a.m. "Adrian's making pancakes. I'll be there." He put the phone down, looked around his apartment, at the crib, the bottles, the tiny clothes Elena had left here for emergencies. All the evidence that he was building something new, something better. Maybe Elena was right. Maybe he needed to move on. Find someone who fit this version of his life instead of mourning the woman who'd belonged to the old one. But tonight, standing in the quiet, Damien wasn't ready for that yet. Tonight, he was just grateful to be someone's father. Someone who got missed when he wasn't there. Someone who got invited to breakfast because his presence mattered. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And right now, something was enough. Breakfast at Adrian's became a weekly thing. Every Saturday morning at 9, Damien showed up with bagels from the place on Lexington that Elena liked, and Adrian made pancakes that were somehow always perfect, golden, fluffy, the kind that made Damien wonder if there was anything this man couldn't do. They'd eat together, the 3 of them plus Sophia, in her high chair making a mess of mashed banana, and it should have been awkward, should have been painful. Damien sitting across from the woman he'd lost, and the man who'd won her, pretending this was normal. But it wasn't painful. It was just life. Messy and complicated and not what any of them had planned, but somehow it worked. "She's starting to teeth," while Elena said one Saturday in late May, wiping banana off Sophia's chin for the 3rd time. "Keeps trying to chew on everything." "That why she bit me yesterday?" Damien asked. Adrian laughed. "She bit you?" "Right on the finger. Drew blood. Welcome to parenthood. Wait until she gets a full set of teeth. Then it really hurts." They talked about normal things. Doctor's appointments. Sleep schedules. Whether Sophia was ready for solid foods or if they should wait another month. The kind of conversations Damien never thought he'd have, never imagined he'd care about, but now consume most of his thoughts. I'm thinking of selling the clubs, Damien said during a lull in conversation. Elena's head snapped up. What? The clubs. Maybe the warehouses too. Downsize. Focus on legitimate businesses. Why? Because I don't want Sophia growing up knowing her father runs half the criminal enterprises in Manhattan. I want her to be proud of me, or at least not ashamed. Adrian set down his coffee. That's a big decision. Yeah, but I've been thinking about it for a while. The clubs make money, but they're complicated, require constant attention. And they're not the kind of thing I want my daughter knowing about. What would you do instead? Elena asked. Real estate, maybe. Consulting. I've got connections, skills that translate to legal work. Marcus thinks I could make a clean transition if I wanted to. Do you want to? Damien looked at Sophia, who was trying to grab his coffee mug with banana-covered hands. Yeah, I think I do. Then you should do it, Adrian said. Life's too short to spend it doing things that don't align with who you want to be. Coming from anyone else, it would have sounded preachy. From Adrian, it just sounded like experience. Over the next 3 months, Damien systematically dismantled the empire he'd spent a decade building, sold the clubs to people who'd run them the same way he had, just with different names on the paperwork, liquidated the warehouses, settled outstanding debts, cut ties with people who wouldn't survive scrutiny if he was trying to go legitimate. It was harder than he'd expected. Not because he missed the work, but because walking away from power felt like admitting defeat, like saying the last 10 years had been a waste. It wasn't a waste, Dr. Santos said during their session. It got you here, to this moment, where you're choosing something different. It got a lot of people hurt. Yes, it did. And you can't undo that. But you can make different choices going forward. That's what growth looks like. Not erasing the past, just refusing to repeat it. By August, Damien Moretti was, for the first time in his adult life, running a completely legal operation. Real estate development, property management, consulting for businesses that needed someone who understood how to navigate complicated negotiations. The money was good. Not empire building good, but enough. More than enough. And he had time, real time, to spend with Sophia, who was 8 months old now and had opinions about everything. She loved books, hated peas, thought it was hilarious when Damien made faces at her, had just started crawling, which meant his apartment now required constant vigilance because she'd try to eat anything she could reach. She's fast, Damien told Elena during a handoff one evening. I turned around for 2 seconds, and she was halfway across the living room trying to chew on a phone charger. Welcome to mobility. It only gets worse from here. Great, that's great. Very reassuring. Elena smiled. You're doing fine, Damien. Better than fine. She adores you. The words settled warm in his chest. Yeah? Yeah, she lights up when you walk in, cries when you leave. That's not nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. September brought an invitation Damien didn't expect. Embossed cardstock, formal script, Elena and Adrian's engagement party. He stared at it for a long time, sitting in his office, trying to figure out how he felt. Sad? Angry? Resigned? All of it? None of it? He called Dr. Santos. They're getting engaged, he said without preamble. How do you feel about that? I don't know. That's why I'm calling you. Sit with it. Don't run from the feeling. Just let yourself feel it and see what comes up. Damien sat with it, felt the twist in his gut, the ache in his chest, the brutal understanding that Elena was moving forward, building a life, choosing happiness, and it was all happening without him. But underneath that was something else, something quieter, relief, maybe, or acceptance. The understanding that Elena deserved this, deserved a partner who'd chosen her from the start, who'd never made her feel like she had to earn her place. I think I'm happy for her, he said finally. You think? I am. I'm happy for her, and I'm sad for me. Both things can be true, right? Both things can absolutely be true. The engagement party was at some gallery in Chelsea, the kind of place where the art cost more than most people's houses and the champagne flowed like water. Damien showed up alone, wearing a suit that had cost $3,000 and feeling like it wasn't nearly nice enough. The room was packed. Manhattan's elite, all dressed in their finest, celebrating two people who clearly belonged together. Damien recognized some faces. business associates of Adrian's. Society types Elena had probably met through charity work. People whose lives didn't include running clubs or moving money or any of the things that had defined Damien for so long. He found Elena near the bar. She wore emerald green, her hair up, diamonds at her throat that probably cost more than Damien's car. She looked happy, genuinely, radiantly happy. "You came," she said, seeing him. "You invited me." "I wasn't sure you would. Neither was I." She studied his face. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I am. Congratulations, really. I mean it. Thank you." She touched his arm, brief, warm. "That means a lot." Adrian appeared with 2 champagne flutes, handed one to Elena, nodded to Damien. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Adrian said, "Can we talk? Privately?" Damien followed him to a quieter corner of the gallery, away from the crowd, near a painting that looked like someone had thrown paint at a canvas and called it art. "I wanted to thank you," Adrian said. "For what?" "For how you've handled all of this, the co-parenting, the transition. It can't have been easy, and you've done it with more grace than most men would. I'm just trying not to screw up my daughter's life." "You're doing more than that. You're being present. You're changing. Elena notices. I notice. I'm not doing it for credit. I know. That's why it matters." Adrian paused. "I also wanted to talk to you about something else. Elena and I are getting married in the spring. Small ceremony, close friends and family. We'd like you to be there." The request surprised him. "At your wedding? You're Sophia's father. You're part of our family, whether any of us planned for that or not. It feels wrong to get married without you there." Damien didn't know what to say. The idea of watching Elena marry someone else should have been torture, should have been the final confirmation that he'd lost everything that mattered. But it wasn't. It was just another step in accepting that life moved forward whether you were ready or not. "I'll be there," he said. "Good. Thank you." They rejoined the party. Damien stayed for another hour, made small talk with people he didn't know, watched Elena and Adrian move through the crowd like they'd been doing this their whole lives, like they fit together in a way that was obvious to everyone who saw them. When he left, he didn't feel destroyed, just tired, and maybe a little hopeful that someday he'd find what they had, with someone else, in a different life. October brought Sophia's first birthday. They threw a party at Adrian's place because it had the most space. 24 people showed up, friends, family, Adrian's brother and his kids, Carlo and his wife and their 3 children who immediately took over the living room. Sophia wore a ridiculous frilly dress and a tiny crown, spent most of the party covered in frosting from the cake she'd demolished with her bare hands, cried when people sang happy birthday because apparently singing scared her, laughed when Damien lifted her up and spun her around because that was their thing now. "She's gotten so big," Carlo's wife said, watching them. "Feels like just yesterday you were panicking about changing diapers." "I still panic about diapers." "You're doing fine, better than fine. Your daughter's lucky to have you." The words hit different than they used to. A year ago, Damien would have brushed them off, would have said something about how luck had nothing to do with it, how he was just doing what needed to be done. Now he just said, "Thank you, I'm trying." That night, after everyone left and Sophia was asleep in her crib and Damien's apartment was quiet again, he sat on his couch and thought about the last year, about everything that had changed, everything he'd lost, everything he'd gained. He'd lost Elena, lost the empire he'd built, lost the version of himself that had defined his entire adult life. But he'd gained Sophia, gained a relationship with his daughter that was real and messy and nothing like what he'd expected, gained the beginnings of self-awareness, gained the understanding that power and control and fear were poor substitutes for actual human connection. It wasn't redemption. Dr. Santos had been clear about that. You didn't get redemption for doing what you should have done in the first place. You just got the chance to do better. But Damien would take it. The wedding was in April, Central Park, under cherry blossoms that were just starting to bloom. 50 people. String quartet. The kind of ceremony that was elegant without being ostentatious, expensive without being showy. Damien sat in the 3rd row holding Sophia, who was 16 months old now and obsessed with pulling his tie. He'd learned to wear clip-ons around her, saved time, and prevented strangulation. Elena walked down the aisle on her father's arm, wearing a dress that was simple and perfect and everything she deserved. Adrian waited at the altar looking like a man who'd won the lottery and knew it. The ceremony was short. Traditional vows with personal touches. Adrian promised to honor Elena, to support her, to be her partner in all things. Elena promised the same. They exchanged rings, kissed while everyone applauded. And Damien felt something release in his chest, some final piece of grief or regret or wishful thinking that he'd been carrying without realizing it. Elena was married, officially, legally, permanently attached to someone who wasn't him. And it was okay. It hurt, but it was okay. At the reception, Sophia decided she wanted to dance. Damien carried her to the dance floor during a slow song, swayed with her in his arms while she giggled and grabbed at the lights. Elena appeared beside them. "May I?" Damien handed Sophia over, watched Elena dance with their daughter, the two of them spinning in circles, Sophia's laugh filling the space around them. Adrian joined them, took Sophia so Elena could actually dance properly. The three of them moved together. Adrian, Elena, Sophia, looking like exactly what they were, a family. Damien watched from the edge of the dance floor and felt, for the first time, genuinely happy for them. Not resigned, not accepting, actually happy. "She looks beautiful," a voice said beside him. He turned. A woman stood there, late 30s, dark hair, warm eyes. She wore a blue dress and held a glass of wine. "Sorry," she said. "I'm Rachel, friend of Elena's from the charity board. You're Damien, right? Sophia's father?" "Yeah, that's me." "She talks about you sometimes, says you've really stepped up." "I'm trying. That's all any of us can do." She paused. "This might be forward, but would you like to dance? You look like you could use a distraction." Damien looked at her, really looked, saw someone kind, someone real, someone who was offering human connection without agenda or expectation. "Yeah," he said. "I'd like that." They danced, talked, discovered they had things in common, similar taste in books. Both hated pretentious art. Both thought the chicken at this wedding was overcooked. She made him laugh. He made her laugh. It was easy in a way things hadn't been easy in a long time. When the song ended, she handed him her card. "I'm probably breaking some kind of social rule by giving you this at someone else's wedding, but I'd like to have coffee sometime, if you're interested." Damien took the card. "I'm interested." "Good. Call me." She walked away. Damien stood there holding a business card from a woman he'd just met, feeling something that might have been hope. Later, when he was leaving, Elena caught him at the door. "I saw you dancing with Rachel," she said. "Yeah, she seems nice." "She is nice, smart, funny, single, very single." "Are you matchmaking at your own wedding?" "I'm suggesting that you deserve to be happy, and that maybe you should stop waiting for something that's never going to happen and start building something new." Damien smiled. "I'm working on it." "Good." Elena hugged him, brief but genuine. "Thank you for being here, for being part of this, for being the kind of father Sophia deserves. Thank you for giving me the chance." He left, got in his car, sat there for a moment looking at Rachel's business card before putting it carefully in his wallet. He called her 3 days later. They had coffee, then dinner, then another dinner. Started seeing each other casually. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people enjoying each other's company. Rachel knew about Elena, about Sophia, about Damien's past and all the mistakes he'd made. She didn't run, didn't judge, just listened and decided he was worth getting to know anyway. "I'm not looking for perfect," she said one night over Thai food. "I'm looking for honest, for real, for someone who's actually trying to be better instead of just claiming they are." Zantas Mosie. "I'm definitely trying." "I can see that. It's one of the things I like about you." They took it slow. Damien introduced her to Sophia after 3 months of dating. Sophia loved her immediately, which felt like a sign. Rachel was good with kids, patient, playful. Didn't try to be Sophia's mother, but didn't avoid being in her life either. Elena approved. Adrian approved. Dr. Santos said it was healthy progress. Carlo said it was about damn time. A year after the wedding, Damien and Rachel moved in together. Not to his place or hers, but to a new apartment they picked out together. Smaller than what Damien was used to, cozier. Actually felt like a home instead of a showroom. Sophia had her own room there. Pink walls because that's what she'd insisted on at 2.5 years old. Books everywhere, stuffed animals, evidence of a child who split her time between two households and felt loved in both. "This is good," Rachel said one Saturday morning, watching Damien make pancakes while Sophia colored at the kitchen table. "This thing we're building, it's good." Yeah, Damien agreed. "It is." It wasn't the life he'd imagined, wasn't the empire he'd built or the fairy tale ending where he got the girl back and everything was perfect, but it was real. It was honest. It was built on showing up and trying and making different choices than the ones that had destroyed his first chance. 2 years later, on a random Tuesday in June, Damien got a call from his lawyer. "The last of the clubs officially sold," Marcus said. "You're out. Completely legitimate. Clean. How's it feel?" Weird, good. He hung up, stood in his office, the home office in the apartment he shared with Rachel, looking out at a view that wasn't as impressive as his old penthouse, but felt more like home. His phone buzzed. Text from Elena. "Sophia's recital is tomorrow at 4. You're still coming, right?" "Wouldn't miss it." "Good. She's been practicing her song all week. Fair warning. It involves a lot of hand motions and she's very serious about them. Can't wait." He put the phone down. Thought about the last 5 years. About the man he'd been. Arrogant, controlling, convinced he could replace anything that bored him. About the man he was becoming. Still flawed, still making mistakes, but trying. Actually trying. Sophia's recital was in a community center in Brooklyn. 23-year-olds singing songs about rainbows and friendship while their parents filmed on phones and tried not to cry. Damien sat between Rachel and Elena. Adrian was on Elena's other side. They clapped when Sophia came out in her little costume, sang her song with all the seriousness of someone performing at Carnegie Hall, and took a bow that was mostly just a dramatic dip forward. Afterward, they all went for ice cream. The 5 of them, Damien, Rachel, Elena, Adrian, and Sophia. A weird little family that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. "She was amazing," Rachel said, wiping chocolate off Sophia's face. "She was very loud," Elena said. "I think we have a future Broadway star." "Or a future lawyer," Adrian added. "She's very persuasive when she wants something." "She gets that from me," Damien and Elena said at the same time. They looked at each other, laughed. Sophia climbed into Damien's lap, sticky hands and all. "Daddy, did you like my song?" "I loved your song. You were perfect." "I know." She said it with such confidence that everyone laughed. That night, after dropping Sophia off at Elena and Adrian's place, Damien and Rachel walked home through the city. Summer in Manhattan, warm enough to be pleasant. The streets full of people living their lives. "Can I ask you something?" Rachel said. "Yeah." "Do you ever regret it?" "How things turned out. You could have fought for Elena, could have made things messier. Instead, you just let her go." Damien thought about it. "I regret what I did to get to that point, the choices I made, the ways I hurt her. But letting her go? No. That was the only decent thing I did in that whole situation. She deserves to be happy. She deserves Adrian, and fighting for her would have just been selfish. Another way of making it about what I wanted instead of what she needed. That's very mature of you. Took me long enough to get there." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rachel said, "I'm glad you let her go, because if you hadn't, we wouldn't be here. Here's pretty good. Here's very good." She was right. Here was very good. Not perfect, not what Damien had planned or expected or thought he wanted, but real. Built on honesty and effort and the understanding that love wasn't about ownership or control. It was about showing up, being present, choosing someone every day, and letting them choose you back. 3 years later, Damien married Rachel in a small ceremony at a vineyard upstate. Sophia was the flower girl. Elena and Adrian came. Carlo and his family came. Dr. Santos even came, sitting in the back with a smile that suggested she was proud of how far her patient had come. During the reception, Damien danced with Sophia, who was 6 now and had opinions about everything from music to dress colors to whether the cake was chocolate enough. "Are you happy, Daddy?" she asked. "Yeah, baby, I'm very happy." "Good. You should be happy. Rachel makes you smile a lot." "She does. You make me smile a lot, too." "I know, I'm very good at it." She was. She absolutely was. Elena found him later, standing at the edge of the dance floor watching Rachel talk to his new sister-in-law. "She's good for you," Elena said.
"Yeah, she is. I'm glad you found her. Glad you found this." "Me too." He looked at Elena. "Thank you for everything. For giving me a chance to be Sophia's father. For not shutting me out when you had every right to. For showing me what it looks like to actually choose happiness instead of just chasing it. You did the work, Damien. I just didn't get in your way. Still, thank you." They stood in comfortable silence. Two people who'd loved each other badly and learned to love their daughter better, watching the life they'd built from the ruins of what they'd destroyed. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different?" Elena asked. "If you'd been ready for us back then?" "Sometimes. But I don't think I could have been ready. I was too broken, too selfish. I had to lose everything to learn how to actually value anything." "That's sad." "Maybe. But it's also true. Some people learn from watching. Some learn from listening. I had to learn from completely screwing up and spending years putting myself back together. And now? Now I'm better, not perfect, still mess up, but better. That's all any of us can ask for." The sun set over the vineyard, painting everything in gold. The reception continued around them, people laughing and dancing and celebrating two people who'd found each other, not in spite of their past, but because of them. Damien thought about the Mafia boss he'd been, the man who'd thought he could replace anything that bored him, who'd thrown away the queen for a cheap thrill and spent years regretting it. That man was gone. Not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into something different, something better. A father who showed up, a partner who tried, a man who understood that real power wasn't about control or fear. It was about connection, about choosing to be present, about building something that mattered more than money or empire or image. Sophia ran over, grabbed his hand. "Daddy, come dance with me and Rachel." He let his daughter pull him onto the dance floor, where his wife was waiting with a smile that said she loved him exactly as he was, flawed and trying and enough. And Damien realized, spinning his daughter in circles while his wife laughed and his ex-wife watched with approval, that he'd finally found what he'd been looking for all along. Not a kingdom to rule, not a woman to possess, not power to wield over people who feared him. Just this, just love, just family, just the quiet joy of being chosen and choosing back. The queen he'd thrown away had built her own kingdom. And Damien? He'd learned that real royalty wasn't about crowns or thrones or dominance. It was about showing up every day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. It was about being present for the people who mattered, about letting them see you fail and trying anyway, about understanding that redemption wasn't a destination you reached. It was a direction you walked every single day for the rest of your life. Elena had been right that night at the hospital when she'd said people don't really change. Core personalities stayed the same. The things that made you who you were ran too deep to excavate completely. But people could choose differently, could learn, could grow into better versions of themselves if they were willing to do the work. Damien had done the work, was still doing it, would probably be doing it forever. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the work was the reward. The trying, the showing up, the choosing to be better even when easier options existed. The song ended. Sophia hugged him. Rachel kissed his cheek. Across the room, Elena raised her glass in a silent toast. Damien raised his back. To second chances, to hard lessons learned, to queens who deserved better and kings who learned to give it, to daughters who made you want to be worthy of the title father, to wives who loved you despite your past, to families built from broken pieces and somehow made whole. The DJ started another song. Sophia demanded another dance. Life moved forward the way it always did, messy and complicated, and nothing like what anyone planned.
but real, honest, worth fighting for. And for Damien Moretti, the man who'd once thought he could replace anything, that was more than enough. It was everything.